Let's look at types of functions. Let us write a simplified version of the greet user function we had earlier in the last lecture. So this is the greet user function that has one argument. So that we have the formatted string, hi, then we have the name. In programming, we have two types of functions. We have functions that perform a task and functions that compute and return a value. The example that we have above and the one that we've had before, where we had two arguments, are functions that perform a task. They print something on the terminal. In contrast, the round function will calculate and return a value. The functions that we will write will fall in these two categories. I'll show you how to rewrite our greet user function to the second type. So we will change such that instead of printing, it will return a value. I'll show you how. So we have these two types of methods. So we have the first one where we're defining get greeting, which has an argument, then print. When we run that, we get this. When we run that, let's run again. When we run that, we get this. Then we also have where a function which returns a value. Like you can see here, return f iname. So we are returning this string. So we are returning, but it is not printing on the screen. So we're just returning so that it can feed as an input to another function. So when we call this, we have this, which is running here. Then this one, although we give an argument, but it is not printing because we've not commanded it to print. Because it returns a value, we will need to store that value in a different variable, that is message. So that is, we say that message equals to get greeting Suresh. So you might ask, which of these two is efficient? Well, in the first one, we will just print the message on the terminal. In the second, we will get the opportunity to save the value in a file or send it in an email. For the second case, we will have to have another function. The second type of function is not to print something on the terminal. We can get this and do anything that we need with it. We can print it on the terminal. So like print message, or we can write it to a file, like file equals to open my file.txt, then rewritable. We will look at this when we look at input and output functions. So don't worry about this. Then we write it to the file.write. These are functions we look at later in this course. Do not worry about this. You learn them when you look at files. One thing I want to specify and to emphasize here is that you can do anything with the message variable. You can print it on the screen. You can send it to a file or send it in an email. One more thing before we finish this. When we run this program, we get hi Suresh, which is we've run, and that is what we got. But what if we had this inside print function like this? Def greet user, the way we had, then we say print greet user Suresh. What will we get? We will get, let's try. Now, so if we have this, like we've defined our function here, we have get greeting, which is our function that has one argument, which is name. Now, when we print this, print get greeting into brackets Patel, we will get hi Patel, then none. So we'll get hi Suresh, then none. What does it mean? None is the return value of the greet user function. In Python, by default, all functions return a none value. None is an object that represents the absence of a value. We will learn more about none in the course. What is important now is that all functions return none by default unless you specifically define a return value. So if we return something, say a string, we will no longer have none value. So let us define another function here. Now, if we run this, you can see hi Patel, then these three dots. So we no longer have the none, although we are printing the same. So because we are returning, all functions return a none, but now because we have a return, it will print that return instead of saying none. Something for clarification here. Earlier we mentioned on two types of functions, those that carry out a task and those that return a value. So even though we define the function here as that carries out a task, it is still a function that returns a value by default because all functions return none. They return a value by default. So that is it for types of functions.